I don't want to go.
You know, looking at how the fandom treated the voice actors in Goose, that line has so much more weight. Many times fandoms go far beyond the scope of community. They go from loud and proud to vindictive and spiteful. Purity culture rooted in self gratification is growing in real time in what are supposed to be spaces dedicated to media. These parasocial fandoms, or parafandoms as I'll call them, have gotten so bad that they target creators and participants for not being what fans want when they want. To be honest, this isn't a new concept, we learned it from evangelism, but it's gotten so bad from fandoms that it's branched off into its own world of Nope, and how the fandom treated the Amazing Digital Circus is probably the most notable current example. Hi, I'm Rode. I'm part of the Tetherball system. I'm a critical applied linguist, ESL teacher, and former theater kid. I focus on power dynamics in language and community, language learning tips, and reading and communicating allegory and media literacy. While I only have a bachelor's degree as my highest credential, I feel like passion is just as important as empathy and research, and that goes double to studying people and how we act. A lot of people take for granted the anonymity of the internet, but with not only our supposed encrypted and protected data sold to data brokers, advertisers, and other forms of covert surveillance, but the growth of surveillance as a whole, we take the internet for granted. The internet and data is forever, whether we like it or not. Not only can it hold the beauty of community, but it can also highlight the atrocities of it. And how the creator and the voice actors of the Amazing Digital Circus were treated is no exception. In 2019, James Gunn, director of Guardians of the Galaxy, was fired by Disney for at the time decade-old tweets mocking rape victims, victims of pedophilia, and giving a lot of horrible takes against the LGBTQIA2 community. There's no sugarcoating it. What Gunn said then was abhorrent. It was disgusting. It dehumanized victims, and it was an all-around show. However, there was outrage by the internet in support of Gunn, saying that people can change in a decade and that Disney was taking things too far. In wake of current chaos of expressions of the First Amendment and opinions regarding right-wing martyrs getting teachers and essential workers fired immediately after posts, the fervor of parafandoms feels no different from political evangelism or companies like Disney not even a decade ago. Yes, what people say in the past can be in bad taste at best and irredeemable at worst. However, the violent acts of parafandoms do read a lot like hypervigilant PR stunts like what happened to James Gunn. Not every masked or unmasked celebrity, big or small, is a James Charles using PR apologies to scrape back whatever community they had by using niceties and gestures to downplay the harassment enabled and arguably instigated against someone in need. To be honest, the support for Coverboy here is way too sweet, while for others it's slim to none. I wonder why. And for indie celebrities and beloved creators, the expectation of perfection is held to such a stricter standard than, say, PDF Pretty Boy here. However, while Charles fans continue to uplift him and other content creators with mountains of evidence of harm, the Amazing Digital Circus fandom scavenged for deplorable takes from Gooseworks to claim that she, a trans woman who has voiced support for marginalized people, especially black folks and other folks of color, is racist. This so-called backlash has extended to other LGBTQIA2 creators such as Funky Frogbait, who came to Gooseworks' defense as they saw she was being falsely accused and targeted. And the fact all of this discourse was going on not only during the weight of the last act, but also during Pride Month is not lost on me. And it shouldn't be lost on you either. Why were people claiming Gooseworks was racist, though? Because of a 7-year-old live stream with her, Michael Kovac, and other well-known TADC cast over a game of Jackbox. Etymology Nerd made a short about the R slur that is divisive, to say the least. While there is statistical evidence of a certain term growing in use, let's not forget that in the 2000s and 2010s, people used it to be edgy, cringe, not realizing or caring about the ableist connotations. In a modern internet era, that's the backbone of where and how the term has grown in use. Why do I mention this? Because edge culture like that doesn't easily go away, but it too is a spectrum. And that spectrum is heavily nuanced in community and history.
And I said, everyone in here is allowed to call me my at which point each of the 3 lawyers up here pointed at me and said, okay, my and
the N slur has seen a similar resurgence, if you can call it that, as the R slur, given the growth of emboldened racists, ableists, and more with the current administration in the US. Just for an example. If you want to see specific examples, maybe check out Tizzyant. However, this is different from marginalized communities reclaiming a term and only allowing those in said community to use it as a term of endearment. Not everyone in the community needs to reclaim it, and to push reclamation as a prerequisite to be a true member only alienates people further. Oh wait, where have I heard that before? Let's not beat around the bush. Politics and culture are heavily interconnected, and what we see from them convinces many, inadvertently or directly, that harmful terms and the misappropriation of community-exclusive terms and phrasing are okay. We're allowed to be critical of these actions, whether from a vacuum or culturally accepted, especially when marginalized people are the victim or the punching bag of it all. Empathy is important. However, so is nuance. When marginalized people give even a slight okay to be referred to by a term rooted in their oppression, it is inferred that it can only be used privately. Using that term outside of your friend group is not only going to be taken the wrong way if you talk about it to anyone else, but it's also a break of trust and vulnerability. However, when a lot of privileged folks are given any semblance of a pass, they generalize it to everyone and everything. I'm sorry, but not every white chick is the I want to be ninja woman, and if she's your inspiration, maybe look elsewhere, sweetheart. It's tokenizing your private past to be a to everyone else. If you think 2000s to 2010s Newgrounds throwing the R slur was a bad take, which it is, then maybe move that fervor to something like this, huh? Be a little more modern. Because the woman made a movie to tokenize her racism past. Let's be honest, that's just cringe. Now, regarding the livestream, members of the TADC cast were playing TKO, a Jackbox game, and a chatter with a username with the prefix nega came in. When Ashley Nichols said hello, Michael Kovac and others on stream got worried due to a misunderstanding of Nichols' accent and pronunciation. From there, the livestream joked about the name, saying my nega to lighten the mood. Was the joke in bad taste? Maybe, that's not my place to say, I'm white as f***. But what I can say is the fandom cools feeling Kovac to claim he's racist, mocking and targeting the voice actors at conventions and social media by hostily memeing this older take is so much worse a take and look on the fandom than anything the cast could have ever done. And let's be honest, this isn't the first time that Kovac made a mistake and people dogpiled him. Do we really want to act like Western radio censors getting scared of Korean words like nega or Chinese words like nega because they sound too similar to the N slur to excuse not using context and nuance to realize otherwise? Because that's what the Parafandom did and harassed Gooseworks and the gang over entitlement and weaponized misunderstanding akin to a white savior complex. Now with all of that explanation out of the way, let's talk about Michael Kovac, as well as how the fandom has projected their perception onto him. Michael Kovac is a complicated man, and arguably the heart of some of the controversies related to the amazing digital circus. If not for it coming to light that he cheated on his then partner, another fellow TADC voice actor, while being in a polyamorous relationship, it's possible that none of this chaos against the amazing digital circus would have ever happened. Like how Jax feared his actions in the past would be held over his head, Kovac's actions in the internet spotlight were held over not just his, but Gooseworks, as if she has control over another person. Is cheating a bad take? Absolutely, I'm not downplaying that, but this is also a very personal issue that we as fans have no reason to be as invested in as the fandom has been. The fervor of the fandom to claim that even an amicable breakup from a harmful situation is worthy of direct condemnation is such a stretch that I am disgusted. This scandal came out well before any of the current chaos, and I have high feeling it emboldened people to target Gooseworks and others. Why? Because one little mistake and miscommunication can be your downfall. And the fact that Kovac was also part of the 2017 live stream is not lost on me. It certainly wasn't lost on others, given so often they would quote-unquote roast Kovac and its character Jax by standing at his standee, ripping the pig livestream quote at best, to harassing Kovac and other voice actors at worst. After watching the last act in theaters, I can't help but find Kovac being cast as Jax apt. There's no way Goose or anyone could have had the hindsight to know the fandom's reaction and violence against the cast, but the irony that the fandom dogpiled on Jax as a character, generally claiming him an edgelord, a cringefest incarnate, is not lost on me. That pressure and hostility no doubt impacted the cast, no different than how Jax internalized his fears of himself. We see that it already impacted them all, with Gooseworks, for example, stepping down and saying that there's no more canon TADC content going forward due to direct consequence of how the Parafandom treated her and others. Words have power. Our actions have consequences, not just to others, but to ourselves. To project insecurities and demand perfect attendance and action of others like life is a school with a zero-tolerance policy is just as damaging as to not communicate our fears and feel like everyone is against us just because we don't know how people will react if we tell them what we think or how we did. Actually, scratch that, zero-tolerance policies are worse. They often cause people to have these fears while often blaming them for their fears and doing nothing to listen, empathize, or accommodate them. The pressure to be vulnerable is intense, but if you're vulnerable in the wrong way, whether to a parent, a friend, a partner, if your story or fears aren't what others expected, the consequences are dire. For some, deadly. Listening to others is seen as a privilege for the few, but the viewpoint makes it all the easier to weaponize that privilege. And when people don't fit another's expectation of being in need or pathetic, someone that needs to be fixed rather than someone who just needs a shoulder to cry on, it makes it all the easier to not only objectify them, but abandon and blame them for not being enough of a victim. These kinds of ideas make it all the more common to internalize criticism. People lash out and push harder, thinking that being the evil that others want will make others go away. Often, though, it just emboldens their tunnel vision as they see the evil as confirmation of their bias. If showing others' behavior is just as poor an attempt to combat bullying and harassment as killing with kindness, then what are people supposed to do? Spoilers ahead for the last act. Jax assumes others' perceptions of him that he thinks they're more real than actually talking to them and finding their real thoughts. It's what causes one of his biggest mistakes, causing someone else's despair. He doesn't know how to process the loss of those around him, so his lashing out and avant-garde presentation, whether he actually does it or not, has him become so hypercritical internally that he's instead projected how he thought he treated others onto himself. How he talks in the last act is him at his worst, his lowest. Does that mean he actually talked that way? In a way, yes, but not to Gangle, Zubul, or anyone else, but to himself. If anything, the scenes where we see through Jack's eyes, those are his true words. Everything else is his corrupted self-accusations eating himself alive. Until it's too late. Parafandoms are toxically positive, opening the door to creativity but being so cliquey that one mistake will cause you to be bullied, harassed, and threatened to the point you might lose yourself. And if you do lose yourself, others will say that you just did it for attention. Your struggles are seen as such perfect timing, as if to purposefully harm others through a last laugh. And it's all your fault in the end that you weren't understood. It can never be another's responsibility, because they simply opened the door, right? Oh, how foggy that mirror must be. The Amazing Digital Circus is a story about despair and finding ourselves outside of others and our own perceptions and expectations of our predicaments. To err is human, and if we continue to hold ourselves or others around us to such a high standard that we strip them of humanity, then all we will see and become is a monster. To not only apologize, to change, and to acknowledge and accept our actions, good, bad, everywhere in between, but to introspect and intersect our understanding of others with ourselves is also human. When we lose our sense of empathy, of kindness, when expectation overrides grace, we other. Now the fandom has become AM, weaponizing creativity and action against both the community and the creators, getting angry about what is or isn't canon while refusing to accept the theme and portrayal that the creators intended. The fandom micromanages so much that it isolates and terrorizes those with the creative means, and when the creativity inevitably doesn't fit expectation, the fandom lashes out and claims nothing was done right. This pressure for perfection only stagnates the community more. In order to go after the few deemed remotely harmful, the entire circus has collapsed. But in the end, the only ones who did wrong are the ones who didn't understand the power of their opinion. Understanding that everyone is a person with their own lives, paths, goals, mistakes, or Sonder is something that's taken me years to not only acknowledge but accept. Parafandoms, however, do not promote such Sonder, and in reality corrupt the very thing they claim to support. Individuality. The parafandom of the Amazing Digital Circus encompasses the corruption of positivity. Rather than accept that people will find themselves anew in circumstances outside of their control, instead, the hope for an adventure and escaping what we've done, a story fitting a self-fulfilling prophecy for what could have been. To return to the past rather than accept the present has stagnated the community from understanding the show, its creator, and the voice actors alike. Now the community is broken apart. Abstracted. It's too late to save what is lost, because now we are left with the consequences of our actions. And for this fandom, they committed the ultimate mistake, ostracizing, if not killing, the source. If we truly want to be there for the creators and voice actors, now more than ever, we need to see them where they are and care. Rebuild what we have known not as an escape, but as a presence to help us heal and move forward. Otherwise, we'll just continue to hurt and extend that toxicity to other communities, turning them too into another parafandom. Thanks so much for sticking around till the end of the video. If you haven't already, be sure to take a look at all of our streaming platforms, our socials, and our official Discord server. Do know that while this is the end of the video, it is not the end of our time together, as the road to Dusk will always be open for another adventure. Please have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is in your time zone, as we say. Bye-bye.